Well everyone, it's time for us to go and take a look at the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus and see how this particular phone holds up in 2024. Now this phone has came out so many years ago and it genuinely is pretty crazy because the Note 10 Plus is actually one of the crazy examples from a lot of different phone manufacturers where the hardware is better than the software that's running on it. So what I mean by that is basically if the Note 10 Plus was getting the current version of Android or it was promised like the next 2 or 3 versions of Android, I think it's still a very good phone I'd recommend people to buy. But would I still recommend people buying it? Let's go and take a look. If you want to pick up some phones I would recommend buying this year though, links will be down in the description. You can get them from there. You can help support the channel at the same time. Now, starting off with the outside of the Note 10 Plus, on the front of this particular phone, you are getting a 6.8-inch, 1440p dynamic AMOLED display. It's a very, very, very good panel for what you're getting here. A few things. One, it is a 60Hz panel. So it's not anything crazy. It's that standard 60Hz that you normally get from most displays and most devices back in 2019 when this phone first came out. And I do think from that moment on, it was a very, very good, respectable display. Like, I like this phone a lot from that perspective, and it was a very good looking display. Hole punch, centered. You're also getting very thin bezels, and it was a curved glass display at that too. So there was actually lots of reasons why this type of device was actually killing it from that perspective, which again was actually very awesome. So personally for me, if I'm getting a phone, I want it to look like this, even from 2019, from 2024, so 5 years later, it's still a crazy phone from that perspective. On the bottom, you're getting a USB Type-C port, which is great to have. I liked having a USB Type-C port, and you are getting an S Pen on this device as well. So an S Pen is awesome. This was one of the last Note phones. There was only one model after this, and once again, I liked having the S Pen capability because you're able to go ahead and use it as a stylus. That was another really cool thing going on for this device as well, and genuinely one of my most favorite things going on for these types of devices. On the backside, you're getting a full-on glass back, and depending on which model you get, you may have actually gotten a model that had that type of, kind of aura to it. It was a very cool looking type of device with that type of texture to the back, and it was a very cool thing going on for that phone, from that perspective as well. So, triple camera setup, wireless charging, reverse wireless charging as well. And the thing you have to remember, this phone came out around the same time, or like a year after, the Samsung Galaxy Note 9. The Note 9 was a very big deal, but this phone came out the same year as the Galaxy S10. The S10 was a monumental change, I would say, coming from the previous generation of Samsung phones, and the fact that you were able to get a phone like the Samsung Galaxy S9 that had that type of capability was very cool, going from the S9 to the S10. The S10 was a big change. I was very happy they made those types of changes on this type of phone. So when I look at the outside of the Note 10 Plus, there are lots of reasons why I like this phone. It still looks very good, it still feels very good in the hand, and you are still getting top tier features from a device like this, which came out like 5 years ago. In fact, there's a lot of things that this phone has that the iPhone 15 Pro doesn't have. Things like, the S Pen capability, a 1440p display, big massive display on this phone too. This is a very good phone for how old this device is. From a price tag standpoint, this phone did come out, in 2019, so it doesn't cost what it used to cost anymore. This device, is coming around for about that, $280 price tag on Amazon right now. That's really not that much money to pay for a device like this. It still is a lot of money, but it really isn't like a crazy price tag as you'd probably expect. Like the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus, as of right now, is actually a very good price tag. You would probably think the Note 10 Plus being what it is isn't really that expensive, and I do think this in and of itself is a very, very cool, interesting thing for this particular device. Now, I would tell you, is that a good price tag to pay for this phone? Maybe. But because this phone isn't really getting sought for anymore, it may not be the first phone I'd recommend people to buy, and I'll talk about that a little bit in this video. But camera-wise, this thing is giving you that triple camera setup, which I genuinely thought was a really cool thing. It still is a very, very nice, respectable camera for what you're getting here. I think with something like the Note 10 Plus, this type of camera is very solid. For one, you're getting 4K 60 on the front and the back of this particular phone. Having that type of capability again is very cool because you can easily just boot this thing up and have a very good, camera setup on this thing. This was one of the last Notes before this Note got, 8K. So it's one of the last Notes to have just 4K 60 at top tier. But that's still a higher resolution than or that's the same resolution you can film in than something like the iPhone 15s, like the Google Pixel 8s. Those phones can still not do 8K capability. So having a phone like the Galaxy Note 10 Plus that had 4K at 60 from 2019 is still fairly good for the most part. And again, I don't really have that much to complain about from that perspective on this particular device. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Also, inside of social media applications, this phone's not going to do that well. So if you're talking like Snapchat or TikTok or Instagram, this phone may not give you that great of an experience from that perspective, from a camera perspective on this device. So take it as you will, but that's kind of how we kind of see this particular camera from that perspective as of this point. Now, from a software perspective, I will tell you, this is probably one of the biggest, not detrimental things going on for this phone, but one of the sadder aspects of this particular device. Like I opened up this video with, if you were going through and looking at this phone, you would be shocked to see that the software of this phone, like if it was still getting software support, could definitely be a phone I'd recommend people to buy. Like, what's not to love about it? It's almost like a flagship type of device. You're getting on it in a lot of different ways, minus like a 90 to 120 Hz display. But the software of this thing is the problem. So it's already like 2 years of Android behind. This thing came out in Android, 9.0, Android, One UI, but now it's on Android 12. And the issue with that is that you're basically no longer getting software support on this thing. You're getting some security updates here and there, but those full-on software updates, you're basically no longer getting anymore. And once again, that's a reason why I wouldn't recommend buying this particular device. I would not want to recommend a phone to people if it's already going to be outdated, and that is identically exactly what's going on with this particular phone. So take it as you will, but that is one main massive reason I wouldn't really recommend buying a Samsung Galaxy, Note 10 Plus anymore, is because this device is already kind of outdated by the time you already buy it. So take it from me, you do not want to be buying phones that are already outdated with software, especially if you plan on using it for several years from now. So that kind of covers it up from that perspective as well. Now, from a performance perspective, this device is giving you that Snapdragon 855 chipset inside with 12 gigabytes of RAM. Now, what's very funny is this particular phone is kind of coming in the heels of something like the, S24 Ultra, I would say. So if you're looking at the Note 10 Plus, you can kind of consider that the S24 Ultra is kind of the main line, successor of this thing for this day and age. But if you even look at something like the Galaxy S24 Plus, there were so many years where essentially 12 gigabytes of RAM was not even what you were getting. For the S23 Plus, S22 Plus, so on and so forth, for so many years, you were only getting 8 gigabytes of RAM on those particular models of phones. So the fact that we were basically getting, 12 gigabytes of RAM on this particular device was insane. And 12 gigs of RAM is still a massive amount of RAM to have on this particular phone, if I'm being completely honest. So with something like the Note 10 Plus, this phone is actually not a terrible performing device. It still actually has a lot of power built inside, and if you have a phone that has that 855 chipset with 12 gigabytes of RAM, still a very respectable device and has a ton of capability and power within it. Unfortunately, because this phone's, doesn't have a 120 Hz refresh rate, it can be a little slow. And unfortunately for this device, because a lot of these newer devices are giving you things like, the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3 chipset inside with 16 gigabytes of RAM, those devices are definitely going to be better than this thing. But I would tell you, looking at a device like the Samsung Galaxy Note 10 Plus, it's a very good phone in a lot of different ways. And I am a really big, fan of the Note 10 Plus in so many different ways because of the way Samsung was able to go and make this device and make it such a powerful phone in so many different ways. So to kind of sum up this video, what I'll definitely tell you is, I'm a big fan of the Note 10 Plus. I think this phone is a very, very good device for a lot of different people out there. I don't know if this would be the phone I would recommend people to buy though. Like, I don't know if this particular phone is the one I'd be like, hey, go ahead and buy it, it's going to be the perfect one for you. This is a phone that came and and went. The main line of this phone, the Note lineup, isn't even here anymore. So because of that, I probably wouldn't recommend buying this phone anymore for the average person out there. I love that it has a micro SD card slot and has an S Pen and all that stuff. But for the average person out there, I would 100% recommend buying a phone that still has software support. And this thing just isn't really cutting it, if I'm being honest. So that pretty much covers it up here. If you have any other thoughts or questions, please let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.